Laugh and clap. You know what to do. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go with Miss Mo. 2 more. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go with Miss Mo. Last time. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go with Miss Mo. Shh. Now this is an Anansi story. Now Anansi stories come from Africa, but they've traveled all over the world because while it was a terrible thing that they went and captured people and made them be slaves in America and Jamaica and all over, those slaves also brought with them their stories. And so their stories spread. Now in a lot of Anansi stories, I have another Anansi story here on my channel, he's a spider, but in some Anansi stories, he's a man. But this story today, he's a spider. Now, this story is about Anansi and his family. Anansi had a wife named Aso. Isn't that a cool name? Aso. And Anansi, while he was clever, he was also sometimes a little bit passionate and a little bit irrational. But his wife was always calm. And Anansi and Aso wanted to have children. And so they did. They had little baby spider eggs. And one by one, the little baby spider eggs hatched, with some time in between. Now the first spider egg hatched, and Anansi and Aso were so excited to see their first little baby, and out came the little tiny baby spider, and it had little tiny baby spider legs, but huge eyeballs. Big eyes! She could barely walk. Her head was constantly being pulled over by these enormous eyeballs. And Anansi looked at the baby and said, "Oh no, Aso, everyone is going to make fun of that baby. They're going to make fun of our little one. Look at those enormous eyes." And he was very worried. And Aso said, "Oh, Anansi, don't worry. She'll be fine. Those eyes might even come in handy." And it did. You see, she grew and grew and grew into her eyes, but her eyes were still enormous. And they realized that she could see for miles and miles and miles with those eyes. And so they named her Farsi, because she could see for so far. Well, time passed, and the next little spider baby egg hatched, and it hatched out, and out came a little baby spider with little baby spider legs and little normal baby spider eyes, but an enormous mouth. Can you open your mouth as big as you can? This is how wide I can open mine. I can use my hands to help. Can you open your mouth really wide? Well, I can't see you, but I can guess that your mouths are open very wide, but they still are not as wide as this little baby spider's. She had the most enormous mouth. And Anansi looked at her and said, "Oh, look at that mouth. All the other animals are going to laugh at her and point at her and make fun of her because of that mouth." And Aso said, "Anansi, don't worry. She'll grow into her mouth, and that mouth might come in handy." And so it did. This little spider grew a little bit into her mouth, but it was still so enormous, and she could go up to big amounts of water, puddles or streams, and she'd go, and she could hold all that water in her big, enormous cheeks. And so they named her Drinkwell, because she could drink very well. Well, time passed, and another little baby egg spider hatched, and another little baby spider came out. Oh, but this spider, he was tough. He had so many muscles. Can you show me your muscles? Oh, they're my muscles. So many muscles. He had muscles on all 8 of his legs. He had muscles on his jaws. He had muscles on his eyelids. His muscles had muscles. He had muscles on his neck. He had muscles on his body. He had muscles on his toes. He had muscles. You didn't know that spiders had toes. Well, they do, and this one had muscles there. I mean, muscles! And Anansi looked, and before he could say a thing to Aso, she said, "Anansi, he'll be fine. You don't know. Those muscles might come in handy." And so they did. Did you know that little muscly spider could pick up an entire tree, rip it out of the ground by its roots, and throw it over his shoulder, over and over again? And so they named him Forest Clearer. Well, there was another little baby spider, and its little baby egg hatched, and out came a little baby spider with little baby legs and a little baby spider head. But his head was covered in eyes. Not big eyes, just little eyes, but there were so many of them. They were all over his head. It looked like he could look in all directions. He had so many eyes. And Anansi looked down. Aso, look at him. Look at all those little eyes. Anansi, he'll be fine. Who knows? You know what she said. Those eyes might come in handy, and you know that they did. You see, all of those little eyes in all the different directions could aim and throw. He had perfect aim. He could throw a rock, and it could go 100, 200, 300 feet and land exactly where he wanted it, because all those little eyes helped him see so sharply. And so they named him Stone Thrower. Now let's review our names. Do you remember? We have Farsi and Hope Drinkwell. We have Forest Clearer and Stone Thrower. There were 2 more little eggs that needed to hatch. And time went by, and then the 5th little egg hatched open. Crack! And there was the little baby spider with his little baby legs and his little baby spider body. But then Anansi saw on the end of each of those spiders' legs were claws. Spiny, sharpy claws. Oh, Anansi said, he looks scary, Aso. And Aso said, Anansi, he'll be fine. Who knows? Those little claws might come in handy, and they did. You see, Anansi would go hunting or fishing and bring home a fish or a fox, and he would usually have to pull out his knife and cut and skin, and it was a very long process. But this little guy with his claws could skin an animal like that, and so they named him Skinner. Now, there were 6 eggs, 6 babies. 1 was left, and it took a long time. But finally, that last little spider egg hatched. And out the spider came. And it came. And it came. And it came. Because this little baby spider was not so little. She was enormous and fat and squishy. She had 8 little fat little legs that came out of her big fat body. And Anansi looked at her and looked at Aso and shrugged. And Aso said, "Don't worry, she'll be fine. Who knows? Being that squishy and big might come in handy." And do you know what? Of course, Aso was right. The other little spiders loved their baby sister because she was like a big squishy spider trampoline. They could jump on her and cuddle on her, and they could climb to the top of the very tallest branches and jump and fall and bing! And she loved it. She laughed and laughed, and it was like they were tickling her. She was so soft and squishy. And so they named her Softy Softy. Do you remember all the spiders' names? We have Farsi, and we have Forest Clearer, and then Stone Thrower, and then we have the claws that are skinning, and then we have Softy Softy, bringing up the end. And these were 6 very unique children, but Anansi loved them, and so did Aso. Now, Anansi every once in a while would have to go far away to market to buy and sell and trade and bring things home to his family. And sometimes these trips would take a day, or sometimes these trips would take 2 days. And so it was regular for Anansi to be gone. But this time, his trip took 3 days, and then it took 4 days, and then it took 5 days, and after a week, Aso got very worried. Where is Anansi? This wasn't like Anansi to be gone for this long. And then it was 8 days, and when Anansi had been gone for 10 days, Aso knew something was wrong. She gathered her 6 children, and she said, clever children, I have a feeling that something terrible has happened to your daddy. He's gone. He's been gone for 10 days. We need to find him and help him. But who can help? Who, clever children, who could look for Anansi? And I bet you can guess who. Up came Farsi. Mama, I will look. And she climbed to the top of a rock, and she opened her big eyes. And she looked, and she looked. Oh, Mama, I think I see. I see in the direction where Daddy went, and I see by a lake on the other side of the impenetrable forest a long trail that looked like his tracks. Mama, it looks like a fish has eaten him and then pulled him down into the lake. And then she crawled back down and looked at her family and said, but it's on the other side of the impenetrable forest. Now, you may not know what impenetrable means, but it's a big word, isn't it? And it means that the trees grew so thickly together that no one, not even a spider, could walk through. The trees blocked everyone's path. And Aso looked at her clever children and said, clever children, who can clear the path so we can help your father? Do you know who?
I will help, he said. Don't worry, Mother. I will save Daddy.
And so they all followed behind Forest Clearer, and he reached out his muscly legs and he ripped up one tree at a time. Rip-pa, 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 until there was a nice clear path, and they followed along. And there they were at the edge of a lake. Somewhere inside was a fish, and somewhere inside of that fish was their papa Anansi. But how could they find the fish? How could they get rid of all this water? I bet you know. Drinkwell stepped forward and said, Mama, I will help. And she leaned over, and maybe you can help her. She began to slurp up the lake. And she drank till the whole lake, whoop, was in her cheeks. Now you hold the lake in your cheeks because we're going to need it in a minute. So keep the lake in your cheeks. Hope, while I tell the story. Hope. Good. So Drinkwell sat there, holding the lake in her cheeks. And the others looked, and they saw one fish that had a bump in it that looked about like an Anansi-sized bump. And they all scrambled down, and together they pulled the fish, and they brought it to the bank. And now all the other fish were getting thirsty and tired. And so Drinkwell went back to the edge, and now you can let the lake out of your cheeks. And the water filled the lake again. Well, now they had this little fish, and it was flopping and flopping. And Aso looked at her children and said, clever children, how shall we get Anansi, your papa, out of the fish? And I bet you know who stepped forward. Skinner. Mama, I will save Daddy. And he went and he cut open the fish, and out came Anansi. He was alive. But he was very tired and very slimy, and he smelled very, very bad. Ugh, wet, icky fish smell. Ew. And so none of his children or his wife wanted to give him a hug. They were so happy to see him, but he did smell very bad. And so they took some steps away from Anansi. Well, Anansi was all alone on the side of the lake, and he smelled like fish. And while you may not think that smells very good, and I definitely don't think that smells very good, an eagle? Oh, he thought it smelled very good. And so with his eyes, he saw this slimy, fishy spider all by itself. And he swooped down and grabbed Anansi in his talons and flew off before anyone could stop him. "Oh no, children," Aso said. "Look at that eagle. How can we get your father down from the eagle? Who can help?" Can you guess who? "I'll help." And Stone Thrower took all of his eyes and focused on that eagle's leg. And he picked up a rock and he threw it as hard as he could, and it landed right above Anansi's head. Whoa! The eagle shouted in pain and let Anansi go. Well, Anansi was very high, and he was falling very fast. And also turned, "Who? Anansi's going to crumple to and fall to his death. Who can help him, clever children?" And I bet you know who. "I'll help him, Mama. I'll save Daddy," said Softy Softy. And she looked this way and that way, and she shifted to the right and she shifted to the left, and she watched as Anansi was falling, and then she got right into the place, and she took a big breath to be extra soft and squishy, and boom! Anansi landed on Softy Softy like a big pillow. He was safe. And now all the children didn't even care that he smelled like fish. They were so happy to see him alive the second time that they gave him hugs and kisses and hugs, and they were so happy. And they helped him walk home through the forest, and they made him his favorite pot of stew, and they sat around and listened, and they were so happy to hear his story and to know he was safe. Well, a few days went by, and after Anansi had rested, he decided it was time to go to the market again, but one a little closer to home, and not in the direction of the lake. And on his path to the market, he found this beautiful, shining, silvery white stone. It was huge and beautiful and special, and he thought, "This will be the perfect gift to my children for saving my life." And so instead of the market, he went back home, and he brought the stone, and he gave it to Farsi. And he said, "Farsi, you saw me. You helped me. You saved my life. This is for you." And Farsi looked at the stone, and then looked at her brothers and sisters, and said, No, Daddy. I didn't save you. I just saw you by the lake. Forest Clearer is the one who pulled out the trees by their roots so that we could get to the lake and save you. Forest Clearer saved you, Daddy." And she handed the stone to Forest Clearer. Well, Forest Clearer and his big muscly arms looked at the stone, and he looked at his brothers and sisters, and he looked at his daddy, and he said, No, Daddy, I didn't save you. I just pulled trees out of the way. Drinkwell is the one who saved you. She's the one who drank up all the water so we could find the fish that had swallowed you. She saved your life." And he handed the stone to Drinkwell. And Drinkwell looked at the stone, and she looked at her brothers and sisters, and she said to Anansi, No, Daddy, I didn't save you. I just drank up the water. It was Skinner. Skinner was the one who got you out of the fish. Skinner saved your life, Daddy." And she handed the stone to Skinner. Skinner took the stone in his clawed hands, looked at the stone, looked at his brothers and sisters, and I bet you can guess what he said. No, Daddy, I didn't save your life. I just got you out of the fish. But then the eagle picked you up, and you would have died if Stone Thrower hadn't thrown that stone and gotten him to drop you. Oh, Daddy, Stone Thrower saved your life," and handed the stone to Stone Thrower. Stone Thrower had the stone, looked at the stone, looked at his brothers and sisters, and I know you know what he said. No, Daddy, I didn't save you. I just threw a rock. But you would have died if Softy Soft hadn't been able to catch you. Softy Soft saved you, Daddy. And Softy Soft had the stone, and she looked at her daddy, and she looked at her brothers and sisters, and she said, No. And Anansi held up a hand and said, "I know what you're going to say. Obviously, you all helped save my life. And then he looked at Aso. And Aso said, I think we should put the stone somewhere where we can share it. And she walked out of the door, and all of them children and Anansi followed her with Softy Soft holding the stone. And they walked to the top of the top of the top of the tallest mountain in their village, almost up to the sky. And they all grabbed the rock at the same time, and on 3 they hoisted it up. 1, 2, 3, and they threw it up. And it went so high into the sky that the God of the heaven caught it and hung it there for all to see. And so we have the moon. And the moon changes. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's big, and sometimes it's in the middle. Sometimes it's glowing brightly, sometimes it's orange, sometimes we can barely see it at all. But wherever it is, big or small or fat or bright or dull, it's what it is. And we love it. And we share it. And it certainly comes in handy. I sure hope you loved that story. Isn't it a fun story? I think it'd be fun to draw pictures of all those different spiders. You should do that. That'd be cool. I'd love to see those pictures. All right, it's time to say goodbye. If you liked this story, then let me know. And share that story with your friends. And look around. There are lots of stories to see. And I tell live stories on Facebook. Go to Mo Reynolds Storyteller on Facebook, and then you'll see some live storytelling shows there. And those are fun, because then you get to be a part of the story. All right, pass this story on to someone else. That's what stories do. Miss Mo has got to go. 2 more, Miss Mo has got to go. Last time, Miss Mo has got to go. Bye. Have a great day and tell someone a story.